This week on Gears and Gasoline, we've got a little something different. We've been known to film reviews of cars, almost always sporty, almost always modded, and almost always Japanese. I'd been meaning to inject a bit more sauerkraut into this sushi bar of a channel we've got going on, and where better to start than with the motherland's Brot und Butter, the Volkswagen GTI. This particular example is a Mark 7, designating it as the 7th in a long line of generations of Golf dating back to 1974. My God, talk about heritage. Considering how long the Golf platform's been around, there hasn't been much straying from the formula though. VW is still making the GTI as a compact hatchback that's strictly front-wheel drive, powered by a turbo 4-cylinder that's as practical as it is fun to drive. This is the owner of the Mark 7 that we drove, Philo.
My name is Philo Lee, and I drive a 2015 Volkswagen GTI.
He came all the way down from New York to get his car filmed, but not just to get his car filmed. More on that later. He's an absurdly nice guy, a talented musician with great taste in cars. And he's a little nuts.
The horsepower and torque that I have roughly should be about a 350 wheel. And that's plenty because I blow the tires off being front-wheel drive.
He's being figurative when he says blow the tires off. We got a chance to drive the car, and well, let's be real, it's not an EG hatch with 600 horsepower. The car will spin tires, no problem, but it's drivable all the way up to the limit with decent traction if you have an intuitive foot. But it's still 350 horsepower at the wheels. Adjusting for drivetrain loss, that means that Philo has almost doubled the factory output of the car in a front-wheel drive vehicle with an open diff. Thanks to Volkswagen's notoriously invasive traction control though, you don't normally find yourself just sitting in a cloud of your own tire smoke. And the car's electric power steering system does a supreme job of mitigating what should be just a ridiculous amount of torque steer. And that's fantastic considering all that's been done to the car.
The things I've done to my car. I have the Golf R Turbo, which is also known as the IS38 Turbo. I have a Unitronic intercooler. I have the spool-in boost pipes and the spool-in short shifter, BWR springs. I have currently the 18x8 RPF ones, and I have the BFI Stage 2 engine, trans, and dogbolt mounts. So the difference between the Mark 6 and the Mark 7 to me, it's basically the tunability. What you call a Stage 1 tune is basically just a flash, and it adds about 50 to 70 horsepower depending on the tuner. So a Stage 2 would add about 100-ish. And then the Stage 2 Plus, which I have, or what people would call an IS38 Turbo, which is the Golf R Turbo, they put upwards of like 120-ish horsepower, probably more than that. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm sorry, can we pause for just a second? I want to go back to the part about the power that the car is making because that's just been fascinating to me. If you really don't care about the potency of German 4-cylinders, I totally understand. Just skip ahead like a minute in the video, I promise I'll try and make it quick. Okay, so ever since the Mark 7 GTI came out, I've been hearing about the crazy power-hungry nature of the engine, and having driven one now, that seems entirely accurate. For the record, the Mark 7 is powered by the 3rd generation EA888 engine, which is an evolution of the same TSI engine that's been in the late model Mark 5 GTIs and all the Mark 6 GTIs. TSI stands for Turbo Stratified Injection, right? So direct injection, which means potency. But the earlier versions of the EA888 engine had direct injection as well. And yet they didn't seem to gain as much power from tuning as the Mark 7 does. I've done some reading on the subject, and the answer seems to be based on a couple of factors. First, Philo's Mark 7 GTI is making more power directly out of the factory than, say, a Mark 6 GTI was 5 years ago. In fact, it's making more power than even Volkswagen will tell you that it's making. Philo's car is rated at 220 horsepower from the factory, which usually refers to horsepower at the crank, and yet Mark 7s have been dynoed making as much as 230 horsepower at the wheels in stock form. I'll leave lots of links in the description for you guys to look at. Volkswagen is sandbagging their numbers, which right off the bat makes tuning seem more potent. But the reason that the 3rd generation EA888 engine makes more power is because it's got a bigger, more free-flowing turbo, which is a moot point in Philo's case because he's already swapped to an even bigger turbo. Still, the Golf R IS38 versus the Mk7 GTI's IS20, but it's not just the turbo. The 3rd gen EA888 also features an exhaust side valveless system, which is formerly exclusive to Audi versions of the motor. However, because Volkswagen has made their information on the EA88 engine so difficult to pin down and generally confusing, I can't say for sure that these are the only differences between the newest generation and the older two. Your comments are welcome as always, and I appreciate you letting me get that off my chest. Regardless, Philo's car has lost none of its drivability in the process of being modded. In fact, Philo's car is so drivable, he's actually using it to tour the continental US, and we just happen to be his first stop.
So currently I am on a road trip and I am planning to end up in California and then I'll be coming back. My current route is, starting from New York, is to go south, first to Virginia, then to Savannah, then Louisiana, Texas, and Colorado, and some other states in between, and then eventually California, and then go up towards Portland if I have enough time, and straight back to New York. The total trip should be about 6,000 miles.
Philo would be hard-pressed to find a car that would offer a better balance of fun and practicality for a trip like this. He had the little car filled to the brim with emergency supplies, tools, and even supplies to do oil changes along the way, or, you know, work on his exhaust.
I had a VWR catback, but then right before this trip, literally the night before the trip, I switched it out for an AWE touring catback with a USP downpipe. Sounds great, no problem so far.
Why did I do this the day before?
Philo had decided the night before leaving for a 6,000-mile road trip that he was going to swap his catback system for one that would be a little bit less drony on the drive. And that's the kind of behavior that makes him so lovable to me. Philo doesn't seem concerned with what most people would consider rational or wise, because, well, who would consider a 6,000-mile road trip rational or wise to begin with? And what's rational about a bigger turbo, for that matter? Nothing. But it's fun.
It's more of a bucket list kind of thing. I've been wanting to do this trip since last year. I didn't get around to doing it, but this year I just had to do it. And I told myself I would, and here I am. First part.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't jealous of Philo getting to go on a cross-country trip, let alone in a car this spectacular. It's seriously one of the most well-rounded cars I've driven, tastefully improving on the things a stock GTI already did right, while spicing up the driving experience immeasurably. Given the choice between Philo's GTI and a stock example, I'd go for Philo's every time. But of course, Volkswagen would never sell Philo's GTI. Volkswagen is the people's car, and they're in the business of crafting a car for the people that is comfortable, fun, and above all, offends no one. What they sell is a great basic car to begin with, and for some people, that's all they need. They can drive it as is. And for other people, that car's a canvas, and on that, they can create their masterpiece.